It's been a turbulent 8-year run for Stephen Amell's Emerald Archer of Star City, which gave birth to an entire DC universe for television. Did the final live up to the series? Find out when Johnnie Torch Reviews Arrow, the series finale. Well, welcome in once again to another Johnnie Torch Reviews. This time we're going to talk about the final episode, which aired yesterday, of Arrow, the much lauded and much derisive, I suppose, series starring Stephen Amell. And as I said, we're going to talk a little bit about the whole series, the legacy, a little bit. We're going to touch on that. Almost impossible not to, with it basically creating, as I said, the whole genre on television for the DC universe. It really gave birth to something, pretty unique. We got a interconnected universe on television, the same way Marvel was doing it over in the movies. DC was actually very successful with it here, even managing to pull a couple of, well, let's say one show, at least as of now, Constantine, from another network to guest star and be part of the continuity. Of course, Supergirl started on CBS, continued on the CW. That wasn't quite as big a feat. But we're going to talk about that, and if you have any favorite memories of Arrow, be sure to let me know in the comments below. If you're one of the Arrow haters, if you're one of the people that don't like this entire Arrowverse and how they've handled the characters and so on and so forth, you're also free to let me know the comments you have below. Leave them in the comments below. I, for the most part, enjoyed the Arrowverse. I, for the most part, like what they've done. They lost sight of a couple of things along the way. Again, we can sort of give it an overview. I don't know if we should do that before I actually get into the review itself. It probably would be good fodder for a separate review. But no, let's talk about the Arrowverse as a whole first. Of course, it started in humble beginnings, basically after Smallville ended. And Smallville was a different type of animal. Smallville was basically a tease. I believe firmly they would have, branched out and made it a full-fledged Superman show had Tom Welling desired it. He was promised he'd never have to wear the costume, and they kept to that promise. I think it was superimposed on him in the finale. Again, not to get derailed, but Smallville was not what I was personally looking for superheroes on television. I wanted to see the costumes. I wanted to see the larger-than-life villains. And Arrow tentatively promised that in the first season. We got an Oliver Queen known not as the Green Arrow, but as Arrow, originally known as the Hood, much like ties to Smallville, where he was only known as the Blur, hardly Superman. And so it kind of felt like, oh, I know where we're going with this. This is another, let's make apologies for the fact that we're superheroes. Let's make apologies for the fact that we're gonna ever so gently dip our toes into the spring of the well of superheroes. But after a tentative first season where they really didn't have villains and costumes, and they had Oliver with a grease paint mask, and they kind of went out of their way to apologize for the fact that this was a genre show. They made up for it with a good, strong finale. I think a lot of people remember the first season of Arrow perhaps a little bit better than it was. Not that it was bad, but it was very much a apology for its genre. Then we got a very strong finale where, out of nowhere, everyone was expecting Tommy to be the villain, and he would sort of, be a Harry Osborn or something. But they really had some guts and killed him off in the finale. Malcolm Merlyn being the villain, again, was a very strong villain, and he was in costume, so it didn't feel like it was as out of place as some of the other villains in the first season. Second season upped the ante. Again, they relied very heavily, particularly in the first half of the series, but, you know, that was kind of a theme throughout it, of the soap opera pinnings. Laurel's descent into booze and pills was a character killer. And they introduced Sarah, who, of course, went on to star in her own show in Legends of Tomorrow, but was a perfect Black Canary. However, they had already promised the role to Katie Cassidy, who, again, is a very accomplished actress in her own right, and I'm glad to see that she did stay with the series in some capacity throughout its 8-year run. Of course, Slade Wilson became the Heavy. The flashbacks, which were, you know, sort of a staple of the show, continued on for several seasons, for 5 seasons, basically telling his 5-year journey from the island, you know, back to the island and back to the mainland of Star City. A very strong villain, which they didn't quite utilize well after the second season, but again, a lot of people, you know, hoped that he would return and would pay off on the potential that he had. So, flash forward, we had Olicity, which, of course, was the bane of many fans. For my part, I did a video that was fairly popular early on, which was basically taking on the Olicity thing. I don't feel that it ruined the show, but the problem was the powers that be catered to them too much, making Felicity kind of more of a you know, the crux of the show, where she really didn't need to be. Now, again, as a superhero purist, I kind of hoped that they would stick with the original plan. The intent obviously was to have Laurel become the Black Canary, have the Black Canary be Oliver's love interest. And that all went out the window when fans started reacting very positively to Felicity, who was originally going to be just a, you know, either a one-time character or maybe a recurring character, sort of as a comic relief character, which is what I think she excelled at. I think Emily Bett Rickards was very, very talented in that role as a Girl Friday. You know, that was kind of, and I said this before in my other video, that was kind of a, you know, a bygone character. You know, the Miss Moneypenny, the Yeoman Rand, you know, sort of the secretary, for lack of a better term, that sort of makes the big goo-goo eyes at the hero, and the hero sort of just, you know, kind of gives her a knowing wink and then just carries on with the business of the day with, you know, the other ladies and you know, larger-than-life figures in his life. But it was a character, Felicity was a character that caught on with a large segment, and at least enough of them vocal to make them change the course of action. Again, I would have preferred a more comic-accurate version, but I did not have as much of a problem with Felicity, in all honesty, if this is the way they were going to go, so long as they didn't kind of wallow in it as a soap opera, which they did, which, again, this goes back to the CW just doing this with Smallville and Dawson's Creek, and sort of that was their modus operandi, and there was not much that would change that. So knowing the parameters of what it was and what the show was always going to be, I didn't have as much of a problem with Felicity, but they did trade on the drama a lot. Season 3, kind of aimless. Season 4 was horrible, and they just tried to manufacture strife between the two where it looked like none really existed. The series sort of changed a little bit to become more in the team format, which was something that was going on with all the shows, I suppose, by that point. I mean, we always had Diggle as sort of his confidant, sort of a, you know, a more youthful Alfred, someone that was sort of Oliver's conscience, played, again, with another fantastic actor, David Ramsey, who, again, has given a lot to the series throughout from beginning to end. And so at the beginning, it was basically Diggle and Felicity being his support, with, you know, perhaps Laurel coming in and out. But then the series sort of changed gears, and it became more of a team show. We got yet another Black Canary. We got, again, which I liked. I liked all the characters they brought in. Well, to an extent. I also liked Renee as Wild Dog. I was getting confused. Is it Wild Dog? I think it's Wild Dog. And I wasn't crazy about Curtis as Mr. Terrific. I felt that he was a sort of just a Felicity substitute, like a Felicity light, just to continue on the sort of jocular, you know, wisecracking computer techie that was no longer going to be a role filled by Felicity. Ragman also, I thought, was kind of expendable, didn't really need him. But I thought those two characters that they kept, the Dinah Drake version of Black Canary and Wild Dog Renee, I think they were good as, you know, members of the team, members of the cast. And I felt the show did get a bit stronger in the last few seasons. We had some stronger villains with the likes of Prometheus, which was a pretty interesting character. And the Imiko storyline of the past year probably wasn't the best, but again, they kind of tried to tie, you know, all the show's loose ends up in the past season, in season 8. And so let's get to the finale here. I was surprised it was only an hour. I was fully expecting it to be 2 hours, but I don't know. I also kind of expected it to be more about, you know, the current state of Oliver, where we left him. Again, spoilers if you haven't seen Crisis on Infinite Earths, but we left him as the Spectre. He was, again, I'm not an authority on this character from DC Comics, but DC Comics character Spectre is sort of a ghost that is allowed to tarry in the mortal world and helps out, you know, basically sight unseen. In Crisis, he was seen, and then he kind of just returns and dies at the hands of the Anti-Monitor, supposedly taking out the Anti-Monitor, though he returns again to be fought later. Again, so it didn't really feel like that was really entirely wrapped up. I'm not exactly sure. We'll get to the finale of what they actually did with the character in a moment, but I'm saying that the end of last season sort of already set the stage for this. We already kind of knew that Oliver was going to survive to an extent, even though he is dead. And Felicity, we've already seen, was taken up in the future, in the year 2040, to be reunited with Oliver in whatever form he still seemed to exist in. Alright, so having known that, getting into the episode, the multiverse, of course, is now coalesced, and pretty much all the Earths are brought into Earth Prime. I believe there's still different Earths that do exist. Kind of hard to understand, but apparently Titans, because it's still airing, exists in its own world. Apparently the DCEU exists in its own world, and the Stargirl show, which apparently is going to air on the CW, will also exist in its own world, but apparently she'll have the ability to cross over. So the beginning of the show, the beginning of the episode, is treated as a documentary, which was interesting. It seems as if these characters don't have secret identities to the rest of the world, which I found interesting. Although, again, if you'd seen the Green Arrow and the Black Canary's backdoor pilot of the previous week, apparently it doesn't matter that both Black Canaries have their identities known because they are going to 2040. And I kind of felt that Renee is done the worst here of all of them, because apparently, even though I don't think it's been picked up to series yet, apparently Green Arrow and the Canaries is gonna be a show. I mean, let's admit it, they're going to have their own show. It's going to exist in 2040, and it's going to star Mia, and it's going to have Katie Cassidy and Juliana Harkavy continue on in their roles as Black Canary. But Renee is left sort of with what we're supposed to expect is going to happen to him in the future. He's going to become the mayor of Star City, and apparently this is something that lasts for like 20 years. Again, if that's all he does, and he's just written out that way, that's kind of a shame, because he is the only character that's neither getting a spin-off or being promised the hopes of returning in some form or other. Alright, let's see. They open it with also Moira being spared Slade's axe, or sword, whatever you prefer. And so, again, I'm not sure exactly if this was the best way to finish the series, but it's a complete redo where basically everyone you think has died over the course of the series is back. And frankly, I like it, but it doesn't make much sense. For example, Laurel is still Earth 2 Laurel. She is not Earth 1 Laurel, and while I myself, and I think most Arrow fans, would agree that her character is the preferable one. You know, if you were to have one survive and exist, it would probably be Earth 2 Laurel. But it doesn't make any sense, and she seems to feel guilty about this in a scene with her and Quentin. Quentin, of course, comes back as well. He was killed off about a season ago. Also, Tommy is back. And I would argue that I think Laurel, Earth 1 Laurel's death had less impact on Oliver than Quentin and Tommy. Because they do say, Thea, who's back as well, for the end of this, Willa Holland returns, Thea questions Moira on, why is their father, Robert Queen, still dead? Yeah, I know that he's not really Thea's father. Let's just bypass all that soap opera stuff. But, and Moira says it's because that is what made the death of Robert, who of course killed himself to give Oliver a better chance of survival. Which, again, I always found dubious. I would kind of like to have help on that island and not sort of, be alone. But he killed himself, and that's what made Oliver the man he eventually became. So, again, I kind of felt that Quentin's death, and certainly Tommy's, contributed to making Oliver the man that he would become. So, again, I'm not sure if there is any problem with the story. That is the only significant one I have, is that I don't really know how you pick and choose who comes back and who doesn't. Much as I love Tommy, I wish they could have done something with him full-time. Colin Donnell, I believe is the actor's name, was on Chicago Hope or some television show, so he was unavailable to do a lot during the series. But I don't really know that Tommy surviving now really has much to do to going forward with this, with this Arrowverse, with this whole universe. Okay, we also get Roy back, Roy Harper. He has a robot arm, and I must admit, I remember him losing the arm this season, but I don't remember them making a big to-do about him getting the robot arm, which of course is like he has in the comics. They kind of treat it like it's taken for granted, and maybe, again, let me know in the comments, maybe they didn't do something about it in the show and I missed it, but it seems like we're taking for granted Roy has a robot arm and everyone's treating it like it's a given, and I don't remember him getting this robot arm. Where did he get it from? And all that. It could be a throwaway line. It could be, just Palmer Tech had come across with the robot arm for Roy. I didn't see it, and I just found it, frankly, like, sort of a elephant in the room, so to speak. He wants to reunite with Thea, which I thought was very nice. Again, one of the things I like about this episode and the way they wrap everything up is they pretty much did give the fans what they wanted. I think everybody should be satisfied across the board, unless, of course, you hated Arrow from the beginning. But a lot of people wanted to see Thea and Roy back together, and now they are going to get married, and they are getting back together. Probably my favorite ship, if you were to say a ship in the Arrowverse. Most of the people they pair their ships together, I don't like them. That's why I say, I think basically Oliver and Felicity is one of the more successful ships. They haven't handled it successfully, heaven knows, all the time. But, I mean, I feel, obviously, I think Barry and Iris are miscast. I think whatever they've tried to do with Kara over on Supergirl, it really hasn't been that positive. So, in light of those other characters, I think maybe Felicity and Oliver were better. But the top ship would probably be Thea and Roy. I think everybody felt that they belonged together from the beginning, and of course, eventually Thea accepts the proposal, and they're going to get married. Sarah goes to retrieve Mia from the future, thinking that this is the perfect time that she'll want to partake in her father's funeral. Felicity returns as well. We get the whole team back. We get Ragman. Ragman, keep those bottles quiet. I can't help it. I gotta say that every time I say Ragman. But, basically everyone who ever had anything to do with the show that is, well, not even the ones that are, dead. A lot of them have returned as well. We got Anatoly back. I'm a big fan of that character. Anatoly. We get a cameo at the funeral of the Al Ghuls, Talia, and why is my mind blanking now? But her sister, Sarah's old girlfriend. So they show back up. We get sort of an awkwardness between Mia and Felicity. I found this kind of strange, to be honest. Mia is kind of estranged from Felicity because they had sort of a contentious relationship, I guess, when she was growing up, from her perspective. And for Felicity, she can't seem to wrap her head around the fact that, Mia is a toddler or something at present day, while she's going to meet her as a 20-year-old or whatever, and they kind of stay at arm's length, which is kind of strange. Meanwhile, we get the this is kind of what was strange to me. We get the flashback, and I guess this is sort of like a callback to the early seasons where we're going to have a flashback. At first, I thought this was just because they were doing this. They were interspersing different parts of, past episodes in with the first, 2 or 3 commercial breaks or whatever. But they then put a full-fledged flashback of Arrow Year 1, where Diggle is trying to keep him from being a killer. And, of course, we get a flashback of the vicious killing machine Arrow version of him, which apparently fans loved, and I hated. This did not feel like Green Arrow to me. But I guess this was basically also a sop to the fans of vicious killer Arrow, and get to see him putting bad guys down with arrows indiscriminately one more time. But then he doesn't kill the main guy, which I guess is sort of indicative of that he would listen to Diggle and eventually not kill, because Diggle is from very early on, trying to keep him from becoming, you know, too dark, embracing the darkness, so to speak. Because he didn't kill this guy who was a human trafficker, which of course, again, they picked, you know, quite a guy to let live out of all these underlings and stuff that you're putting down. He doesn't kill this human trafficker, and eventually this human trafficker guy wants to kill William. They even brought him back, the teenage William, because for revenge on Oliver, putting him in prison for 7 years or whatever it was. And he kind of feels like he wasn't justifiably put in prison, I suppose. And Mia gets a chance to save the day, and, you know, through some daring do, you know, she doesn't kill the bad guy here, showing that I guess she is going to take on after Oliver's, you know, moral code. That she's going to live up to him, which I guess is her, you know, mission statement. That's her arc this whole season, you know. So that was pretty good. Get a brief scene with her and William. Apparently, because William's gay, you don't have to worry that he was gonna be interested in her. Because I don't know did she tell him that he was her brother or whatever. I don't know. I don't think so. We got some Easter eggs. John Byrne being the name of the human trafficker. I don't know. That's almost like Joe Quesada being the rapist in Daredevil. It's like, do you really want to make the name of one of like the legends in comics be like such an unsavory character in your TV show? But apparently they didn't have a problem going there. So John Byrne is the last villain that was taken down in Arrow. Let's see. Also, Van Wayne, which I believe was a reference to. Wasn't that Alan Tudyk's character in? What was that comedy show they had a couple of years back? He was supposed to be the cousin of Bruce Wayne. It was a comedy. Disaster or something it was called. I'm not sure. But I think that was an Easter egg meant for that. Let's see, what else do we got? We got the lair closing down for the final time. Again, sad. I would have preferred maybe, like I said, my preference, I said this on another live stream, but my preference would have been that Mia stays in the present and, you know, she could still operate out of the Arrow lair and so on and so forth. But they're gonna stick to 2040 apparently. There is a public demonstration there that Quentin makes, dedicating a statue to Arrow, and it's literally ripped from The Dark Knight Rises. It's nice to see that they actually went out on the same horse they came in on, because basically a lot of people, you know, were able to just lift frames from the show and say, look, this looks just like Nolan's Batman. That's what they were going for. And they did that several times. And they did that several times in this episode, let alone in the series. The statue looked almost exactly like that. The same weird crouched looking down, which I thought looked ridiculous with the Batman statue. Here it comes across a little bit better. Because Arrow kind of always did look down on the city rather than Batman, who seemed like he never was looking down in those movies. I don't know. Then we get the funeral. Emiko is alive again, and apparently she's going to be on friendly terms with Moira and Thea, which is, you know, nice. Mia and Felicity finally get that moment together as mother and daughter, which I was very glad for, and it felt like it took a while to get there. I don't know why that wasn't a little bit earlier. I guess they wanted it at the funeral. But she basically tells Felicity how she's going to live up to Oliver, and that she met Oliver, and that Oliver actually trained her. Again, this feels kind of disappointing in the sense that we don't get all three of them together. We had Felicity with Mia last season, and we had Oliver and Mia for much of this season, but we didn't really get to see the three of them together at one point. I kind of would have liked that. I guess it's not the biggest deal. But, and she basically tells Felicity she's going to carry on as the next Green Arrow. Barry and Kara make a cameo. Kara doesn't have a lot to say, but Barry does have a few words. I don't know. I kind of felt that Barry... Grant Gustin's a phenomenal actor. I kind of felt that maybe he could have afforded a little more emotion. Same with Kara. Again, Melissa Benoist, my favorite actress. I mean, she just is fantastic with this kind of scene. But they were both kind of subdued, I guess, as to not take the tension off of, Felicity and Mia. Catherine McNamara, again, I think she's a fantastic actress. She really brought it. She brings the emotion in these scenes as well a lot. I always said, and again, this is not really a slight at Emily Bett Rickards, I think comedy is her forte. I don't really think she is the best dramatic actress, but and I felt early on in this episode that she did kind of feel like she was mailing it in, dare I say, but I did feel she brought it here at the end. In this scene and the final scene, it really feels like she connects, because I was disappointed that she didn't want to have a larger role in this past season. She wanted out, because, and when I say she's kind of mailing it in, meaning that she isn't, I don't think Emily is emotionally connected with this storyline. She didn't want to play a mother. She didn't want to play, the sort of the mentor to the next Arrow. I think she just wanted sort of to continue to play, the sort of fun, goofy Felicity that is, Mrs. Arrow. And I think she did come through at the end, though. It's kind of strange, because in a sense, I think they did all right without her. But when she came back in, it did feel like her presence was kind of missed. You know what I mean? I think her presence was missed on the show. But again, it felt different. It felt like they could carry on doing it a different way, and I think that's what they did. And then Diggle is the one nominated to do the eulogy, and of course it was, the best, that you could expect from this scene, of course, comes from David Ramsey. I mean, I don't think they could have given that scene to anybody else, and he just, again, acted the heck out of it. He's again, a phenomenal actor that's really done a great job with what originally seemed to be a thankless role. I mean, he was just sort of Oliver's bodyguard, and, you kind of figure, what is he, like a Happy Hogan? You know what I mean? He's just kind of there to carry water for the hero. But then he became his own hero, his own full-fledged hero, a Spartan. And the final Easter egg, of course, we get the montage of all the heroes going their separate ways. And apparently, Diggle finally is going to get that Green Lantern ring and become the John Stewart Green Lantern. Now, I was concerned about this on the one hand, because I was afraid they were going to give him the origin of Hal Jordan, finding the alien and all that. And I said, no, don't steal Hal Jordan's origin. He has to be the first Green Lantern, But they didn't. He finds a box with the lantern ring in it. I was kind of disappointed we didn't get to see him go full costume mode. But again, this is the Arrow finale. This is not the birth story of, this is not the origin story of Green Lantern. So I understand they wanted to hold off on going too far into that. But, like I said, if anybody is owed a spin-off, David Ramsey as John Stewart, of course, his name is John Stewart Diggle. It would be Ramsey. It would be great to see him actually play this. And I know they're going to have a HBO Max show about the Green Lantern. I have no idea if he is going to play John Stewart in that, or if this is just the end, and they just wanted to, let him go out on a note of, this is what he's going to be doing in the future. I think possibly it would be cool to bring him back part-time in other shows. I think that might be more what they're going to do with him. They're probably going to pay lip service to the fact that he has to be off-planet a lot as a Green Lantern. And I don't know. I think that's probably the way they'll work him into the future. All right, let's... and of course, I'll just touch on, the other things. Obviously, Renee is going to become mayor. Sadly, his career as a superhero, I guess, is over. Dinah goes off on her motorcycle to the future, to adventure, which, as I guess we come to find out, she winds up waking up in 2040 along with Black Siren / Black Canary. I don't understand exactly how that worked, but that's the way they left it. Again, it felt like everybody winds up where they belong. Thea winds up with Roy, of course, and vice versa. Moira's still alive. Tommy apparently is from another Earth. He says he was married to Laurel on his Earth. So somehow he became part of this, part of your world, like the Little Mermaid would say. Alright, so... again, at the very end here, they flash forward back to the scene that we had of 2040, where Felicity is transported by the Monitor back to wherever Oliver is. Now again, as I said, I didn't fully understand what's going on here. I think really what they wanted, though, and I'm happy with what they did, was to give us sort of a Wuthering Heights ending. Not the book, but the movie, if you've ever seen the Laurence Olivier movie, where he and Merle Oberon walk... Actually, it's their doubles, if you want to get into Hollywood legend. But well, they walk off into heaven and paradise, and their spirits are seen walking away. That's kind of the note they wanted to leave us on. They didn't want to leave us on, that Felicity lived out another 20 years of her life, and then... whatever, and so I didn't really see this as the afterlife. They really didn't explain it, though, so again, I think they left it purposely vague so that they could, pick up where they left off at some point if need be. They're in the Queen office building where they first met, and Felicity's there with the red pen again, and it did feel like it came full circle. It felt like, they're still alive, they're still very much happy, and they're together, and they're still young. So they could come back. They could conceivably come back. And that's the way I like my stories to end. These are comic book characters. They're not supposed to die. Now, I'll go on this rant here. I prefer this much to what they did with Endgame. At least in this case, while they still wanted to have the funeral and the big death scene, and then another big death scene, and then another funeral, we still got the possibility that Green Arrow is alive, and he is out there, and he is going to come back. Now, I don't know what form he's in. Is he still the Spectre? They really don't tell us. Is Felicity a Spectre too now? They don't tell us. Is he in the afterlife? They don't tell us. I don't necessarily feel bad that they don't tell us, although I would like to know how they would get out of this situation should they ever want to bring them back, which I am willing to bet they will at some point. It's probably going to be for a crossover and something important and earth-shattering, such as this Crisis recent miniseries was. But I don't know exactly how they'll do it, but they still have that opportunity, unlike Endgame, where it's going to be a little bit harder to try to bring Black Widow back. You know what I mean? It's going to be hard to bring Tony back when you've had this huge fanfare that, he died on his shield. He's getting carried out on his shield. In this case, they did all that, but we still kind of have we're privy to the knowledge that the rest of that world doesn't have, that they still exist. And I think that's what's missing from the way the MCU ended. The MCU ended with, a lot of their heavy hitters going. Iron Man's dead. probably never to be revived. His child and widow has got to go on their own in the future. Black Widow sacrificed herself for her friends, for her team, for the world, dies, doesn't even get a funeral, and it's not very conceivable that she can come back because, I think they even addressed that in the film, that the snap couldn't bring her back. She never gets the luxury of a family or real love. And in this, it's much more satisfying. Like I said, it's, and of course with this Captain America, which is sort of their token happy ending, that he gets to go back and rewrite history so that his girlfriend never meets her husband and has her children, but he gets to live with her in a selfish act that Captain America wouldn't ever have done. That's why, like I say, I think this is much preferable. I do think that, as much as the rest of the world thinks that Oliver Queen is dead, and as much as he might, in fact, for all intents and purposes be dead, he still exists. He still exists somewhere out there and can be called upon again as the Spectre, or perhaps now maybe he is just on a different plane. But whatever the case, he's still out there. So I was largely satisfied with this. If you have a problem with it, let me know. I'm curious what's not to like about this. Of course, like I said, it's not perfect. I would have liked a little more information, but basically they gave us, all the characters from the whole show's run. I don't know if Sin was there. I thought I saw her in the funeral scene, but I might be mistaken. But generally, all the characters were brought back to give a little curtain call. I mean, not Malcolm, of course, not Slade, but for all intents, all the other heroes and loved ones of Oliver's were brought back just for a little curtain call, which was nice. We also got, a pretty moving story, a touching story about the rest of the heroes, continuing on, leaving their friend behind. And, we pretty much got a happy ending for Oliver and Felicity. And that's all I really ever want with my superheroes. I don't really want the stories to end, but like I said, Oliver's still out there somewhere, probably going to make a comeback at some point, even if only temporary. And the Arrow lives on somewhere out there. And of course, we still have Mia, and we still have the Canaries, which is going to carry on his legacy in his stead until he returns. The once and future Arrow, that's the way I think of him. And again, before we sign off here, a lot of credit and gratitude to Stephen Amell and all these other actors. I don't want to name them all: David Ramsey, Emily Bett Rickards, Katie Cassidy, a lot of the long-time Paul Blackthorne, a lot of the long-time cast members, Willa Holland. Too many to name, but they really did start something big here. They weaved a tapestry that, for the most part, we all enjoyed, and of course, it spun off into different areas, and then we managed to have these great crossovers that, again, for the most part, were good. It's something that was never done before, and I don't know if it can be done again. I mean, Marvel could do this to some extent if they work their will correctly. They could do it. They tried doing something like that with Netflix, but I don't think it was nearly as successful. I don't think anybody would equate that. The only thing the Arrowverse is really missing is Batman and Wonder Woman. I guess arguably Aquaman too, but we kind of got a Green Lantern if they would continue on with that. We've got the Flash, we've got Superman, we've got Supergirl. It feels like a fully formed universe, and that all goes back to the beginnings of this show, Arrow, and how they strived. They like I said, they didn't keep that timidity about them for too long. They, by the second season, fully stepped into the waters of the superhero genre, introducing the Flash, introducing the Mask, doing some trick arrows and so forth. It was a lot of fun to see this world given birth. And again, my sincere gratitude to all the people behind the scenes as well as in front of the cameras for what they did to make, you know, a show that, in my opinion, surpassed the Netflix shows. Arrow always had the best action scenes, the best. Even in this episode, we get to see, you know, Arrow flying around on the ropes and swinging around and stuff. We don't get too much of that in Netflix. And then, you know, there was these great action scenes choreographed so well. Again, they did a phenomenal job, the stunt coordinators and so forth. So again, I'm very pleased with the way the series finale went out. I'm very pleased with most of the series. There were a couple of seasons weren't that great, and there were a lot of episodes that weren't that great, but on the whole, again, I would say it was a very successful endeavor. I'm going to give Arrow's series finale 5 stars out of 5. That's 5 stars out of 5. What do I give Arrow as a series on the whole? That's a little more difficult because I haven't revisited too many of the episodes, the older episodes. When I first started watching the show, I would watch each episode 3 times. 3 times. And I unfortunately only watch each episode once now because there is so much to watch. And as I've said before, you know, I don't really want to say oversaturation, but you have to be more choosy with what you watch now. Before, it was just Arrow, and then, okay, Arrow, Flash, and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I can watch all those 3 times in a week if I really are enjoying it. But now there are so many shows that you really can't devote a lot of focus to, and that's why, like I say, there are certain episodes I'm like, I don't remember this being referenced. Did this happen? It happened 2 seasons ago? Oh, okay. I just don't remember it because I've seen it once. But from my memory, again, not trying to be too nostalgic, I would probably give Arrow as a series 4 stars out of 5. Again, I don't want nostalgia to color it because I know there are a few seasons that are not that great. I know there are a few episodes and concepts that are not that great. But then again, it really is groundbreaking in a sense. I don't think it deserves to be knocked down too many pegs just because we had some terrible missteps along the way. You know, that would probably make this series a B+, if I'm going to do it in terms of a letter ranking. Okay, so, once again, let me know what you think in the comments below. And check out The Adventures of Bullets, Bourbon, Private Eye in the link in the description below. You can check out our show, the Torch News Roundup, on Saturdays, the only way to spend your Saturday, where we talk all the, all the news in pop culture and superheroes and science fiction and so forth. All that good stuff. You can check that out on Saturday on my YouTube channel. And check us out on Twitter as well. Link in the description below. So, until next we meet, this is Johnnie Torch reminding you once again, keep the flame burning brightly. And Oliver Queen, you have not failed this city.